answering the specific questions. There are many,
Okay, so I'm going to
many,
answer the question. Okay,
you
so let
know,
me, so let
there
me
are
answer the
many,
question.
many people around the world increasingly concerned about the scale of Israel's response, the appalling death toll of children, the appalling number of children also being orphaned, the appalling number of women being killed, innocent women, and they don't see an end game. They just see Israel continuing to bomb, 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 kill, kill, kill. But how does this end? If the next stage is Rafah, which now has 6 times as many people in it as it did 4 months ago.
Hey y'all, I'm sure most of you guys watched this, but I never covered it on my channel, and ironically I missed it as well. Rabbi Shmuley describes double standards on Piers Morgan Uncensored with normal Finkelstein, going toe-to-toe against normal Finkelstein. Yet Rabbi conveniently overlooks the contradictions in his own rhetoric. No one predicted this 3 ring circles a year ago, and here we are, watching a show where Netanyahu and Shmuley's selective outrage and spin with twisting facts faster than a pretzel factory that all collide in a carnival of contradiction. This one's going to be fun and entertaining. Let's jump into it.
And is a huge refugee camp, and you're trying to find just a few thousand Hamas amongst over 1.5 million people, then you're going to get even more people around the world saying, well, this is a senseless way of conducting war. Now, what do you say?
I hear you. Okay. In the lifetime of your parents, the greatest statesman of the 20th century, Winston Churchill, fought the greatest evil the world had ever seen. Now, the Americans used something called a Norden bomb sight, and they only bombed during the day, and they lost so many crews as a result. It's a phenomenal new Apple series called Masters of the Air that shows this. The British came to the Americans and said, are you guys crazy? You're sending your pilots to die during the day? And the Americans said, well, we want to make sure we are not hitting civilians. We're hitting military sites with this it was the second greatest invention after the atomic bomb of the Second World War, the Norden bomb sight. That's not what you and the British did. You bombed at night indiscriminately, murdering millions of civilians. So by the definition of Norman Finkelstein, who says that whether you intentionally target civilians, which Israel does not, Israel loses hundreds of soldiers.
But the whole point,
with surgical strikes.
Rabbi
Wait, no, but I'm asking, but I need to put one question to Norman Finkelstein.
Let me respond to your argument.
Was Britain a terrorist state fighting the Nazis?
Okay,
yes or no?
I will come to
indiscriminately.
Yes,
I'd like to hear his response.
Let me ask Norman that. What I would say to that, for what it's worth, is that there was huge regret over things like the carpet bombing of Dresden, which led directly
to Cologne, Essen, Dresden.
Which led directly, by the way.
It was April 1945.
I'm just saying.
Let's go to Cologne. Let's go to Dresden. Let's go to Hamburg.
Let me finish.
Yes.
Which led directly to the Geneva Convention to try and prevent these things happening again. Many people think what's happening now in Gaza is a form of that happening again. Norman Finkelstein.
No. What's happening in Gaza is what the Americans did with a Norden bomb site. The Israelis are using surgical targeted strikes.
Well, they're killing a lot of children.
Because Hamas lives under their homes.
If Israel's
Hamas builds.
Rabbi Shmuley, with respect, if Israel's being that precise, why is it killing so many children?
Firstly, I want to know what is the accuracy of your numbers, because I trust Hamas as much as I trust they're complete liars. Secondly, Hamas, unfortunately, wants these children to die, because the more that die, the more you're going to challenge me on TV. Israel wants them to live. Israel withdrew in 2005. Hamas builds their military installations under these children's homes, under their kindergartens, under their nurseries, under their hospitals.
All right,
we now found 350 miles of tunnels under children's homes. That's the size of the subway system.
I want to be fair to both sides on time. Norma Finkelstein, your response.
What would you like me to respond to?
I suppose the analogy with World War II and the fact that indisputably, many hundreds of thousands, if not millions of civilians died in that conflict. And the argument is it was for the greater good of defeating the Nazis. Do you see any parallel with wanting, and I completely understand Israel's desire, fervent desire, to eliminate Hamas after what they did on October the 7th, particularly as Hamas has stated again and again, they want to keep repeating it again and again. So on that particular argument about when you wage a war against whether it's the Nazis or Hamas, a lot of civilians tragically will get killed in the process, but ultimately that shouldn't stop you going ahead with the war to try and achieve your goal. What do you say to that?
What I would say to that is there's a very good reason why this case was brought before the International Court of Justice. That is, as I'm sure you know, that if you examine what Israel has done in Gaza since October 7th, by virtually every dimension you examine it, the intensity of the bombing, the density of the bombing, the magnitude of destruction of civilian dwellings, civilian infrastructure, the percentage, the absolute number of children killed, the relative number of children killed to combatants killed, the percentage of women and children versus men killed, the number of medical personnel killed, the number of journalists killed, the number of UN workers killed. By virtually every dimension that you examine the conflict, by virtually any and every metric that you examine the conflict, Israel's assault on Gaza, which we should bear in mind is among the most densely populated places on God's earth, and it has been sealed off from humanity since 2006. As Giora Island put it in March 2004, Giora Island was the head of the Israeli National Security Council. He described Gaza, and I'm quoting him now, as a huge concentration camp. That's not me, that's Giora Island, the former head of the Israeli National Security Council. So if you put all of these metrics together and you put in and you add in the context being a concentration camp in which half the people are children, 70% are refugees. If you add in the context and the metrics, there is a very good reason why Israel was brought before the International Court of Justice. Now, Mr. Shmuley has every right to question the authority of the numbers, the figures, and so forth. I am a strong believer in the right of Holocaust deniers to make a case before the public because, as John Stuart Mill once put it, we are all fallible, and being fallible, we have to always have a place in our minds open to the possibility that we are wrong. So, like Holocaust deniers, I do believe that Rabbi Mr. Shmuley should have the right to speak. However, granting that right, he has a very tall order. If a Holocaust denier wants to deny the Nazi Holocaust, he or she has to refute a vast corpus of scholarship attesting to the reality of the Nazi Holocaust. In the same way, Rabbi Shmuley, if he wants to deny that a plausible case for genocide can be made in Gaza, he has to refute a vast body of documentation. And that documentation ran, as it was presented by the South African application, it ran to 84 single-spaced pages with literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of footnotes. Now, that's the first hurdle.
Are we really
That was,
just
allow
gonna
me,
allow?
allow
Are
me,
we gonna
allow me to
Professor,
finish.
Come on. No.
Allow me to finish.
Your debating style is to drone on, coma-inducing. That's how you debate. You try to put your opponents into slumber. For God's sake, you made your point. It's time for me to respond. That's a dialogue.
No,
you
I'm not.
dominate this
done.
debate
I'm not.
like you did with Alan Dershowitz, and you took 3/4 of the time. I won't allow it. Now, let me respond. First of all, Piers, I'm glad that Norm has at least had the intellectual honesty to concede the first point. that the ICJ, the International, never ruled against Israel. Now notice he's saying that South Africa brought the case. They lost the case, first point. Because I've been attacking his credibility. For you to say, Piers, I'm attacking him ad hominem, his personality, I'm not. The question is whether this man is a scholar or not. He has no tenure. He was denied tenure at DePaul University. He is only known because he's a Jewish anti-Semite. Now, number two, this is the 5th time he accused Israel of genocide. He started in 1982 in Lebanon. Now, what does genocide mean? It was coined by a Holocaust survivor in 1947 named Raphael Lemkin. Geno is an ethnicity. Side means murder. It is the murder of an ethnicity. Norm needs to make the case that Israel is slaughtering Palestinians because they're Palestinians and Arabs and Muslims. Well, then how does Israel have 1.9 million totally safe Israeli citizens who vote in the Knesset, an Israeli Arab judge who put an Israeli Arab judge who put an Israeli Jewish president in jail for rape, by the way? Why is that none of the Israeli Arabs have risen up to stop this genocide? Because it has nothing to do with
all right, but let me ask you this. Let me ask you this.
It has to do with a date called October 7th.
Let me ask you this.
1,200 Jews were shot in the genitals, burned to death, slaughtered, and no democracy should allow that, except for one person, Norm Finkelstein.
No.
Because he has an irrational hatred of Jews.
Rabbi Shmuley, with respect, Norma Finkelstein is not the only person seriously concerned about what's happening in terms of Israel's response.
Genocide? Using the word genocide?
I would say the majority of the world right now is concerned about what's going on in Gaza.
Is President Biden and
believes that Israel's response is now becoming wholly disproportionate. And again, I ask you this question. Netanyahu, incredibly unpopular back home in Israel, probably wouldn't even be prime minister now if it hadn't been for this war, given the scale of the social unrest and protests over his attempt to thwart the power of the Supreme Court. So you've got a deeply unpopular prime minister, particularly with Israelis' own people, right, waging a war, and many people cynically think he's just going to keep doing this because it buys him more time.
And that's a wrap, folks. Rabbi Shmuley's double standards are so blatant as a neon sign in a blackout. While he hurls accusations at everyone, he conveniently ignores when the facts don't suit his narrative, like an actor refusing to read the script. Meanwhile, Norman took the debate because, well, someone has to keep the narrative in check from a factual understanding, and because, unlike Rabbi, Norman's got receipts. First, he's been warning about the disastrous direction this was heading over a year ago. Second, he's not afraid to call out hypocrisy if it means being the fly in the ointment of Shmuley's self-righteous commentary machine. When your moral high ground has more holes than Swiss cheese, it's time for someone to say enough is enough. So here's to Norman for calling out double standards as boldly as a rabbi wearing a pair of mismatched socks and reminding us that in the end, hypocrisy will always be the punchline. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, y'alls, and I hope to catch you in the next one.